Hello everybody and welcome to a game called Mordhau. This is a game that I instantly needed the second I saw it. Before we begin though, how about a fun history fact? According to the German school of swordsmanship, a Mordhau is the practice of taking your sword, flipping it around, and using the hilt of the sword to bash your enemies. This practice started when heavier armor came into play, and soldiers couldn't simply cut through each other anymore. Now if you're looking at this game and thinking chivalry, that's not a bad thing, and you're actually not very far off thinking that. But this game was developed by Triturnian, a small group of very impressive, extremely competent indie devs, and I'll get into why I can so boldly say that later on. Now before I start, this game is currently in alpha, so keep that in mind as I show you the game. Let's go ahead and take a look at the settings menu first. The first menu we have is the game settings, which holds your language, which is only English as of right now. You can hide your HUD, show your crosshair. The next one I thought was really cool. You can turn off gore and dismemberment, which I think for parents out there who want to play this with their kids was a really good setting to implement. You have your bob head sensitivity, which is a great setting for those like me who have motion sickness, your ragdoll limit, your ragdoll stay time, your mouse smoothing, which is set to off, thank God, draw tracers, which essentially shows you where your hits are being placed in the game, and then tracer stay time. Now, this is a good bit of settings for the game tab alone, but it only gets better from here. If we go over to the video settings, you get your resolution scale, windowed mode, which gives you the traditional 3, the frame rate limit, which goes all the way up to 250, VSync, which is auto set to off, but I had to turn on because of some awful screen tearing, field of view, which was automatically at 110, which was the first point of love I have for these developers. You then have camera distance and gamma, which does it for your display settings. Moving on to the actual graphics, you have your anti-aliasing, which is automatically off, but gives you the option between FXAA, TFXAA, SMAA, and SMAA2. Then your texture effects, shadows, indirect shadows, view distance, post-processing, foliage, characters, ragdoll, screen space reflections, bloom, motion blur, which is set at 0.10, and I like it that low, ambient occlusion, lens flares, cloth physics, and you will see this game fully utilize all of those when you play this game. Moving over to the audio, this is the simplest settings menu. You got your master volume, effects volume, and your music volume. These three audio settings are standard, and you can't really ask for more here. Heading on over to the controls, you're actually going to want to go here when you first start up the game, and I'll show you why in a second. So you have a lot of options here, but the one you want is inverse attack direction. Now, I don't know if they'll change this in the future, but the swings sync with your mouse, so if you swipe right, the sword will swipe right. If you swipe left, then it'll swing left, but the game has this set backwards automatically, so I suggest going in here and turning that setting on, which will fix that. I'm not sure why it's set like that, but I'm sure there's gotta be a reason. Anyway, the rest of this is your invert and camera sensitivity and dead zone settings, which I didn't touch and I don't see the need to go over, but the fact that it's in here for you to adjust is awesome. This moves us over to the key bindings, and I would love to go through these with you, but this would take some time. As you can see, there are a ton of key bindings in here for you. This page typically tells you what kind of game you're going to be playing, and even though there are controller settings for you to use, I could not imagine trying to use a controller on this game. I do find it pretty funny that they keyed suicide to end though. Alright, now before we hit play and jump in, let's go ahead and visit the armory. The character you're seeing right now is actually one I made myself. You can really see those cloth physics doing work. Now, there are a few loadouts to choose from. You've got Royal Guard, Skirmisher, Templar, Brute, Executioner, Nord, Gay Robin Hood, and then Infantry. You can take any one of these guys and adjust them to your liking, and there are a lot of settings. Head, neck, torso, shoulders, arms, hands, waist, legs, feet, only certain shirts can fit with certain pants, maybe to keep it historically accurate, so if I wanted to wear a long skirt, I can't be wearing this plate of armor, I have to wear something that matches the skirt and brings out my eyes. Now, down here you can change the emblem on your character's clothes. Underneath that is metal roughness, which is an awesome setting, and then you have metal tint, which again, great setting. I'm really amazed at just how much you can customize here. One thing you might notice is some armor says heavy, some will say medium, and then others will say light. This is a mechanic that actually does work. The heavier the armor, the more hits you can sustain, but the slower you're gonna move. Over at your gear, you have 3 slots at your disposal. For primary, you can choose from swords to spears to battle axes. You can customize them until you found the right one for you. I like the rapier as it's the sword of a gentleman. It's very fast, but the drawback is it takes a million years to kill someone with it. So let's go with the bastard sword. A more mid-range damage weapon that you'll swing a tad slower, but does a bit more damage as well. For your secondary, you can take another sword or a shield, depending on your playstyle, and then for your third slot, you can pick again. Once you've saved your loadout, you can move on to your character's body. You can adjust his weight, his strength, his skin color. As of right now, they only have male characters, but I'm sure they'll probably be adding women in down the road. The skin colors are also a bit limited, but for what they've given us already, I'm not about to complain about that. The last tab is the face. Welcome to Fallout 4. Honestly, the amount of customization per character is astounding. When I showed this game to my friends for the first time, we spent a good hour and a half just doing this. Alright, so let's save our loadout, name our character, and jump into the game. As of right now, there are only 3 game modes. You have Skirmish, which is a team deathmatch sort of game mode where the first to 7 victories wins. You then have a team deathmatch, which is kind of like Skirmish, but instead of 7 wins, it's the first team to 1,000 points. And then there's Deathmatch, which is my personal favorite, as it's a free-for-all game mode. Whichever player has the highest score after the time runs out wins. Now let's move on to the parts of the game that I really like. If you know about a game called Chivalry, that was actually one of the first games that I played when I got into PC gaming. It was Primal Carnage, Chivalry, and then a summer sale hit and I bought everything. Well, I played Chivalry a lot, and I got very good at it. Even today I will almost get guaranteed top leaderboards, and I know I'm bragging, but it's the only game I'm good at, okay? Give me a break. Regardless, what I'm getting at is the combat in Chivalry is very nice, and for the game it is, I always thought it had some of the best fighting mechanics of its genre. Well, that's no longer true. If you love Chivalry's fighting mechanics, you will absolutely adore this game. It's got a much faster pace, it's far more balanced, and the game is very reliant on skill. Almost never as I've been playing this game have I been killed and felt that it wasn't fair. Every time I died, I knew it was because of something I did or did not do. And not only is that a good feeling, but then killing someone in a battle is very rewarding because you earned that kill. You know that it was nothing but skill that got you there, but the game is also easy enough to jump into and learn for those of you guys who will be new. So how's the community? Well, as of right now, this game is not for sale. I was able to contact the developers and get a code sent over, but the only people who have this game right now are the developers, friends of the devs, and about a month ago you could purchase some alpha codes. If I had to guess how many people have this game based on the Steam group, I'd say about 600 to 1,000 people have access to the alpha right now, which is a decent enough size to kind of get a grasp on what the community is like. So, what are they like? Well, to be honest, they're mostly very noble. If you jump onto an online deathmatch game, you'll tend to find people running around waiting for a fight. If you press the X key, you get a list of things you can do, and if you press 1 right after, you'll spin your sword. It seems like most of the community are using this to signal that they want a duel, which is a lot more respectful than I thought it would be. I fear this is probably going to die out once the game fully releases, but it's just really cool to see honor in the community. If someone plays dirty, people tend to gang up on that person and show them that what they did was not okay. It's borderline roleplay, but good. Now going back to the combat, there's some more things that I need to talk about. If you take a sword and press R, you'll flip it over and use the hilt to damage enemies with heavy armor. This again is called a Mordhau. Other weapons like the short swords will be thrown when you press R, and longer weapons will be held differently, typically towards the top of the weapon, which makes you swing faster. Other weapons like the warhammer will be flipped around to use the spiky end. Every weapon has an alternate way that it can be used, which is very nice, especially for how many weapons you have access to. Now, one thing you may be wondering is, where are the bows? Can I be an archer? And as of right now, it looks like no. I don't know if this is a balancing thing or if they just haven't implemented them yet, but I would definitely like to see them put archers in here. I think it would add a whole new dynamic as well. You could carry a sword and then whip out a crossbow and shoot someone that's coming at you, and just like you can block thrown items in the game, you could block the arrows as well. I could see this hurting the community playstyle though, as it would be much harder to have friendly duels when you have pansy archers tossing arrows from across the map. But I think the pros outweigh the cons on that one. And a duels only game mode has got to be something the devs are thinking about. So I talked about throwing small swords and blocking them with your weapons or shields, but there are other mechanics this game has that took me a bit to find out that were really quite surprising. See, when I first started playing the game, this was a game-breaking bug. I took the fastest sword in the game, which was the rapier, and kept lunging at my opponent, which was my brother. There was nothing he could do. If he tried to swing, he was too slow and got hit. And if he just continued to block, he ran out of stamina, so I'd kill him. I thought I had found an exploit until I went online to try my newfound skill, and the first time I tried using it, someone parried me, knocked a sword out of my hand, and struck me down like the insignificant pile of crap I was and carried on to a real fight. Not only did I feel utterly defeated, but embarrassed that I thought I'd tricked the game. The large issue I think I have with this though is I had no idea you could parry. The game at this stage has no tutorial, but they do have a video on the front page of the game that teaches you how to play, so yes, one of the things that you can do is parry. If someone stabs at you, you can counter their attack, which allows you a free hit, and sometimes will knock the sword out of their hands. This can also happen during a regular fight. If I'm in a battle and I hit their sword or shield just right, I can knock it out of their hands. The cool thing about that though, is the developers put weapons all around their maps, so you can potentially just turn around and pick up one once you've dropped one. Another really cool mechanic are how throwing weapons react to shields. You can place shields on your back, so if you're running around the map with that prick who just throws weapons around, it'll just stick into your shield and it'll do you no damage. If you do get stuck with someone who throws weapons at you though, you can always pull it out of yourself and toss it back. Okay, let's talk about the engine. This game is being developed on the Unreal 4 engine, which surprisingly is the same engine PlayerUnknown's runs on. It's funny how one game can run in alpha better than another game can in released beta, but like I said before, this is a very competent dev team, probably the most competent I've ever seen. Bluehole could really learn from these guys. Now that I mention it, Ubisoft and Bethesda could learn from these guys too. This game isn't even released yet and it runs better than most AAA games day 100. You listening, Warner Bros? Pay attention now. However, there are some cons to the engine. The Unreal Engine looks amazing, but physics aren't typically the engine's forte from what I've seen. There isn't a ton of damage to the environment around you, which I think would add that extra level of immersion, but it's not a huge deal. But wait, Barry, there are games that run this engine that have the physics you're talking about. Just look at PlayerUnknown's. You can break fences and stuff. And this is true, but they aren't the kind of realistic physics that the Cry or Source engine offer. I'm definitely not knocking the game for the engine it's run on, it's absolutely beautiful. I can actually play this game at 4K with a stable 60 FPS, no issue. It would just be nice to see crates break open around me as I'm knocked into them. Alright Barry, you keep talking about the game's stability, but as an online battle simulator, how's the netcode? To be honest, it's much better than Chivalry ever was. The only time I had latency was when I was streaming the game, and even then it was minor and infrequent. I was playing against people with 200 plus ping, and even then the fighting was stable, and I could definitely see this being an esports tournament game in the future. So long as everything stays fair, that is. The last pro I need to talk about is that as you're in a server, you can change everything. Your gear, your character, at any time you can do this, and what's even better is the battlefield is loaded behind you in real time, so you can see when the next round starts or if someone's trying to come up behind you. This level of detail is great for this kind of game, and I'm shocked I haven't seen this in other games before. Okay, let's move on to the cons of the game. Now, I kinda hate doing this because I know many of the things I'm going to say are probably going to be fixed, but they are things I found and they need to be addressed. Firstly, as I said before, there is currently no tutorial. The video they give really helps, but there's nothing like hands-on experience, and not everyone who has this game right now has a group of friends that they can test things out with. So adding a tutorial before the game's release is essential. I'm sure they already know that though. Secondly, if you can't play this game at a higher or at the very least steady frame rate, you actually have a major disadvantage. See, the game works off a mouse scroll mechanic, so like I said before, the direction I move my mouse and click is the direction your sword swings. This has to be responsive, and if you're playing this game at even sub 40 FPS, from what I've observed, the game definitely does not feel responsive and actually hinders you as a player, which sucks. But that's why it's such a great thing that this game runs so well. Again, I'm able to play it at 4K, everything on Ultra, at a very stable 60 FPS. So if this kind of optimization holds up, I don't see many people having an issue playing this game at 60, even if you have to turn all the settings down. This next con is a bit subjective, but I think the characters are a bit slow. Even when I had no clothes on, I still felt slower than the slowest characters in Chivalry, and I think boosting the character's default speed just a little bit might do this game well. As a fast-paced game, I also like to be able to move around, but I can also see that it might make the swordplay a bit spammy for players who don't care about actually fighting and want to just run around hitting as many people as possible. I don't know. It was just the only aspect that jumped out at me and screamed, hey, this is a little slow. Then again, as I play the game, it kind of feels alright now, so even if it wasn't changed, no big deal. The next one is actually the biggest con in the game, and it's something a friend of mine likes to call a lingering hitbox. See, if I go to do a stab and I miss my opponent, all I have to do while the stab animation is still in session is turn towards the enemy. This allows a very unfair hit and is not only easy to abuse, but can literally decide the results of a duel sometimes. Now this last con doesn't even exist yet, but it scares the hell out of me, and I can't even believe I'm putting it in here, but with how game development goes these days, I have to say it. This game is built perfectly for the implementation of microtransactions, loot boxes that you can open with keys after matches, or DLC helmets, cloaks and armor, sword skins, and it just scares me. I'd hate to see this game swamped with microtransactions like every other online-only game does, but I just had to add this in. I guess kind of like a, I hope this never happens, so please make me eat my words and make a fool out of myself instead of actually pumping it into the game, but hey, it's not my project. Another really cool thing along with that is I actually had an interview with the developers, and this is what they said regarding me asking that question. Is this game ever, or planned to, have microtransactions, like loot boxes and skins and stuff like that?
No, we
at
don't
all?
have plan for that at launch, or we don't have plan for that at all right now. We don't have some crazy scheme in the works that's going to milk all the money from the players on day one. But it would definitely be something that we would have to work with the community, because we don't want to piss anyone off in these terms, at least. Because, if we piss those guys off, nobody's going to be buying it anyway, so there's no point. Yeah.
I cannot tell you how happy I am to hear that. Like, that is the best answer you could have given. Other than that, I don't really have many cons. The game is very promising, the developers are really cool. Not only did they give some keys for me and a few friends to test out the game, but even allowed me to make an interview with them and ask them a few questions about the concerns I may have at the moment. It went on for about an hour, so I'll upload it here so you guys can take a look if you're interested. This game, again, is Mordhau. It's currently under development by Triturnian, and I was told will probably sell for $25 or your regional equivalent when it's released sometime in 2018. For more information, please check out Mordhau.com or follow them at Twitter at Mordhau. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you next time.